Welcome back to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, and I'm joined once again today for the second half of our conversation with the Abbott brothers, the two farm boys from Vermont who went on to become leaders in the dairy industry. Two different branches from the same tree who have taken different paths but made incredible impacts and continue to do so today. In this conversation, we talk about tough decisions, taking risks, and what it takes to be successful as a leader. Learn with me today as Dave reflects on his experiences as CEO at Purina Mills, as well as stepping outside of the agriculture industry and into leadership roles. And Tim talks about taking the leap from corporate to entrepreneurship. We're back with the Abbott brothers here today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This episode is sponsored by Uplevel Dairy Podcast founding partner Adisseo, a global leader in nutrition solutions and premier provider of rumen-protected methionine for dairy producers who want to optimize milk production, capture more value from components, and maintain the health of their high-performing herds. Feed is the greatest expense on any dairy operation, and don't you want to know how an adjustment to the ration will affect your bottom line? Adisseo empowers nutritionists to make informed ration balancing decisions with MilkPay.com. Customizable to your dairy's own data, this profitability calculator puts the power of real-time milk market information in the palm of your hand. Find out how much your latest ration change is really costing you with the free MilkPay app available on iOS and through MilkPay.com. So you talk about passion, but you also talk about risk and taking risk. What was the hardest decision that you've had to make in your career? Whether it was in a role, in between roles. For you, Dave, what was the hardest one?
Each time I changed jobs, going from one discipline to another, staying in the same discipline and moving one level up wasn't so tough, but it was always scary. And then leaving the company was scary. Tough things, I hated to have to fire people. Most of these employees were people I'd worked with for many years. They were my friends, and mention one name that takes me back, Bruce Baker. Bruce was a part of my management team, and ultimately I had to fire him. And it was a very difficult thing to do, but it was done in such a way that Bruce knew exactly where he stood. There were lots of discussions before the final day, and he wasn't surprised, and I helped him find a new job, and it all ended out okay. But there were a lot of tough decisions. There were a lot of scary moments that go on in a career, and it's been 50 years, so there have been many of them. Making presentations to bankers with private equity groups, and with the dot-com company, traveling to San Francisco and making presentations to the venture capitalists out there. There's a kid with 10 in my graduating class. I bragged that I graduated number 3 in my class. I don't tell anybody that there are only 10 of us. But yeah, it was scary. But embrace those opportunities. That's how you grow, in my opinion, and that's the part of go ahead and take some risk. Step outside of your comfort zone and experience something different and see where it takes you and what you learn from it.
And on that note, when you talk about taking risk, and you had mentioned this earlier as well, that when Tim and Sharon decided to make that purchase of St. Jacobs, that was a really big move. You're leaving corporate, becoming a business owner, essentially entrepreneur. And so, Tim, do you recall the conversations that you had with Dave while you were going through that evaluation of taking that leap, of taking that risk, of making that big decision? Was there anything that he said to you during that time period that stuck with you?
Well, kind of just what he said. And truly, Dave was my sounding board for the whole process, because I knew he'd give me good feedback. I couldn't really talk to fellow coworkers because it was confidential. I didn't have many friends that I could talk to at this level of business. And Dave was our sounding board. And frankly, my kids and Sharon think more of Dave than I do. And so the good news is Sharon, whatever Dave said, Sharon believes. So, but truly, he basically told me what I already knew, that I had the passion, I had the knowledge of the company, and I would have to work like crazy to get it done. But it really wasn't as big a risk as it appeared to be financially, because I had all the chips laid out in front of me, and he helped me dig up a couple other chips that I needed to flip before we did it. And so, yeah, I remember all of it, him giving me direction from a business standpoint and financial. And frankly, if I was down to my last bank when I got our loan for St. Jacobs, and the next call, Dave, was going to be to you to help me put together the money to do it, because I knew you could. And that I'm not just being wise there, that Dave had the connections, that to come up with the gazintos to get this done, Dave could have helped me do that. And Dave, I'm glad I didn't have to do that, not just because I don't want to be that far in debt to you, but no, it worked well. But seriously, it was a great security blanket.
So Dave, would you have bet on your brother if he would have come to you? There you go.
Absolutely. Yeah, no question about it. I don't know, Tim, if it's been a while since we had those discussions, but I remember that was at River Rim when we were in Idaho, and John Fetters, my neighbor, who was a lawyer, got John involved talking to Tim and Sharon too about the legal side of what was going on. So he engaged us, which I was pleased and happy to be part of. But I don't remember if I was just thinking it or if you had actually asked me at one time. But heck yes, I would. I wasn't in a position where I could have really financed the whole deal, but I certainly would have invested in him and bet on big little brother Tim. Yeah.
So really, there's been some pretty incredible mentorship the two of you have provided for each other throughout your careers. And both of you have had success in these areas that ended up within the same industry, but in different branches. And then as we've talked about, Dave, your branches went into some other industries as well. But no doubt you learned so much along the way. And so when we think about success, what does that even mean to you? What does it mean to be successful? How would you define that term?
There's not one size that fits all in terms of success. For some, staying home on the farm and being the best you can be on the farm is success. For others, getting away and doing some things is success. It's defined. It can be. I think it's just such an individual. For me, it's feeling like I have been the best that I could be, and having no regrets that I left something on the table or I didn't put out my full effort when I was on the field playing. I hope that means there was some success. One of the things later in my career, Peggy, that I really enjoyed doing and ended up doing with the Sterling Group a lot was I was asked to mentor young CEOs in these private equity companies, and I had a blast doing that, just hiring and then mentoring them and being there to guide them along. And I look at what some of these young CEOs have accomplished since I worked with them, and I feel a great sense of pride and feel like that was success to me. I think it changes over time. What is it that you're trying to do and what is the definition? For me, it's changed over time. But I think it goes back to finding your passion and being the best that you can be.
And Tim, how about you? Is your definition of success similar or different?
I think it'd be similar. I think it's really hard to say. I have moments now starting another new company or two. I wonder if I am successful. So I think the fact I never can quite get that answer, I think is one driving force. What is success? And you can cut it any which way you want. Money for most people drives success because it allows you to do things you want to do. And I would say I would not be the person to say that money drives everything, but it sure does make it spin. So I think financial stability has to have success at any level. You've got to be able to pay the bills every day. And that doesn't mean millions of dollars, but it means that you can live within your means and be comfortable. So I think finance is one way that I would describe it because I think it leads to all the other things. I don't want people walking out of here saying, you got to be a multimillionaire to be happy. I'm saying you got to pay the bills to be happy. So that would be another thing I'd throw out there.
So with these definitions of success, I want you to think for a moment about what you think it takes to achieve that vision of success. And so if you were to pick 3 keys, if you were to look back on what you've learned along the way and pick 3 keys to attaining the success that you've described, what would those 3 things be? Dave?
Be honest, open, transparent, and be fair and consistent. I put those all in one. Honesty, openness, transparency. I think that's very important. But being fair and consistent in the way you approach everything in your company or in your career, I think is important. It was to me. And this is part of growing up on a dairy farm and about work ethic, I suppose. Do a little more than is required or is expected of you in everything you do. And strive to leave things in better shape than you found them when you're done. One of the things that I took away from being raised on the dairy farm is work ethic, sense of responsibility and accountability. And I think that was one of the big keys to my success. And just going back all the time to that work ethic and accountability, my goodness, it was the basis for a lot of what I was able to achieve. And as I went further in the company and even outside of the company, as I interviewed people, if I could find someone that was born and raised on a dairy farm, I'd hire them in a minute because I knew they knew how to work. They had a sense of accountability, responsibility, and sometimes it's hard to find that and interview for it in a company. So that's the piece. A third one for me is surround yourself with people that are smarter than you are. I was very successful at doing that. For a lot of people, as they rise up through companies, they want to surround themselves with people that agree with them, people who won't challenge them. Yes, men, yes, women. I didn't want any part of that. I wanted people who would challenge me, challenge my thinking. And very seldom was there a time when I made decisions by myself, independently, individually. But usually it was a team. And I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to be debated. I wanted to hear the other side of the argument. And we generally came up with better ideas. So I think a big part of whatever success I had was my ability to surround myself with people that were smarter than I was and made me look a whole lot better.
So, Tim, what's your top three?
I'll show you when I'm done this, Peggy. Knight and Ruth Abbott raised two sons that are pretty doggone similar. I weigh 100 pounds more, and I'm 14 years younger, but my three were exactly those three.
They were not.
They absolutely were.
No.
Surround yourself with good people, work hard, and be honest. Literally, those are my three that I've got written down. So that's interesting, and we truly did not talk about that. But to be a little bit original, and I think it fits into this conversation right now, I think Dave and I would both say, and he's used it in his talk a little bit, don't take yourself too seriously. Stop believing your own BS. Listen to others. And he's brought up respect and transparency and all that. But I do think humor and not taking yourself too seriously, and Peggy, you've seen me some of my moments of less than serious activities. But I think it's worth reemphasizing. Surround yourself with good people, work hard, and be honest. Those are my three, and that's just what Dave said.
Would you say these were kind of what you would also call your Core values?
Yep. That fits it.
And I had one more, but since you said I could only have three, I said,
okay, fine. You can squeeze one more in.
I'll put one more in, and I think it's just don't settle for mediocrity. Go for the gusto. Expect only the best of yourself and those around you, and don't take second best. We can all be better.
I love that. This is fantastic. These keys to success that from both of you, both at different branches, same roots, same tree, that can sit halfway across the country from each other and have these very aligned values. I'd say it's business, but it's life, and it's how you treat people and how you go through life with what God's given you. And something that's been stirring in my mind a little bit lately that I'd like to just ping the two of you on as well. When you think about success and this idea of success, but also the experience of being a leader at a CEO level. So to put a little frame of context around this, I've had several conversations lately on the podcast, coming up on some future podcast episodes, with individuals who are men and women in the dairy industry that have been in high-level management for several years that are now stepping up into being CEOs of their dairies. So these are dairy producers that they've done the work, and now where they are at, they are being called into that leadership seat. And so I think there's a lot they can learn from what you have identified as success factors. But I want to challenge you to also share from your experience being a CEO, working with CEOs, Dave. And Tim, essentially, you're the CEO of your own business as well. What are the sticking points? If you could say that there are some common warnings that you would wish to share with individuals that are stepping up into their own roles as CEO, what should they be watching out for in that transition?
It's not about power and authority. It's not about fear and intimidation. In the years past, I think that a lot of CEOs rose to the levels that they were, and all of a sudden they got these big chips on their shoulder, and they had the power and the authority, and they expected everybody to bow down to them, and that's what they considered to be leadership. I think that's pretty well gone from today's society. Hopefully it is. But to me, the first requirement is you got to have a vision. You got to have a mission. To lead, you've got to know where you're going. It's a little hard to lead somebody if you don't really know where you're trying to go. And then secondly, I think you need to be able to articulate that vision and communicate it to the employees or whoever your audience might be, but communicate it. And in the communication, turn a vision or a mission into actionable items. It's nice to go out and share a mission or a vision, but there are no items that are really action items that are linked to it. So I think you've got to turn it into actions. And another little cartoon that I had cut out and I had it on my desk for a long time was a cowboy sitting on a horse and a herd of cattle rounding him up. And at the bottom says, "Get the herd headed roughly west." I know in my experience, especially at Purina, but even in the other companies that I worked with, they were pretty good sized companies. And the message had to be clear and consistent. And the only way to succeed was to get the herd headed roughly west, get everybody on the same page, get everybody to understand the role that they played in achieving the goals that we had set. Third thing is model the behaviors that you want to see in your organization. If you're moving up into the CEO role or whatever supervisory role, model the behaviors you want to see. Don't send mixed signals. And the last thing is be a team player as well as a team leader. For me, getting on the field and not staying on the sidelines was so important in the corporate world. I got great pleasure leaving the office, going around, walking around, talking to people, and trying to catch somebody doing something good. There's so many times that employees are fearful. It's like, oh, they're going to catch me doing something bad. I wanted to catch people doing something good and then hold them up as an example of, look what's happened here. And when the team takes the field, I wanted to be on the field with them as opposed to standing on the sidelines or standing up in the corporate office saying, go take that hill for me. So be a team player if you're moving into a leadership role as well as the team leader.
That's some good stuff. And thank you for those stories to go along with it too, Dave. And Tim, I got to switch over to you here. That transition into being a CEO. What else is there? What is there to watch out for? What are the stumbling blocks? And what are some of the lessons that you've learned as essentially that's the role that you're in now?
I've taken Dave's comments. Those are helpful even to me in my businesses today, whether I'm with Sharon, the leader of 2 or 3 different businesses today. And all the things Dave just said, you have to employ every day. But I've also led some big teams, but also worked with a lot of people that have led teams. And the common thing that they all have is focus and communication. So Dave brought them up, but my word again is focus. But if you can't communicate that focus, it doesn't matter. If you can't tell the people that are working with you or for you how to get there. The other thing, if you're saying warning signals, I've watched so many people in my corporate life and even watch them today that pick self over team. Let me get on your shoulders and ride, and then I'm going to jump off your shoulders and push you down when I do that. And be careful of those people, because those people will never lead your company. I've dealt with some of them, but I watch them, and I still watch them today, and it just makes you frustrated. And then I love Dave's analogy about heading the herd approximately west. I think as a leader, leading a business, a pitfall can be chasing the strays. If you're herding the herd approximately west, don't chase the stray. Let the stray go. I think those are good things. And then one of my favorite guys I've ever worked with was a guy at ABS called Jesus Martinez. Grew up in Puerto Rico, tough Puerto Rican kid, played semi-pro baseball. And he always told me, he'd say, Timmy, don't ever lose a good person. And you can't ever let the good people leave you. So I guess those are maybe pitfalls or just ideas that I've learned over the years.
Oh, and so very valuable. This is fantastic, both of you, and how grateful I am for my own learning, but more importantly, of what others can learn from your experiences of leading people, leading organizations. Did you have any other thoughts on leadership that you want to share today?
The only thing I would go back to is still go back to my guys that mentored me, and that Maury Core at Jersey, and Dr. Walton, and Dick Smith at ABS, and people like that. They did what Dave said, and they dug in the trenches with you. One of my favorite ABS stories was a young guy I worked with, Roger Brunig, was in charge of facilities at the time. And he was a 20-year-old kid working at ABS. On a Saturday, he was in the top of the silo forking out feed because the silo unloader was broke. And that morning, he's up there doing the worst job you could possibly do at a farm, forking out a silo. And up that silo climbed Dr. Walton and got in there with a fork with him and helped him that Saturday morning fork that out. And I think rolling up your sleeves and getting into that, those are the guys that taught me how to treat people that I work with or that I work for. Dave said it before, but that story, the Dr. Walton story, it's always stuck with me because that's real. And that's how he built the great company he built. And I think Dave, in his building of Purina, or maybe in what we've done in the cattle breeding world, it's because you roll up your sleeves and do the exact same things with everybody.
Yeah, that brought a couple of things to my mind. I worked with a guy that actually went down to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and ran Exopac for, I guess, 6 months or so, looking for a new CEO, and hired Stan Bickledge. And Stan came in, and we had big printing presses out on the floor, and we did a lot of plastic and paper packaging. And the plastic packaging was really, really like 4-color, 9-color. I don't know how many colors anymore. But we were having a problem with one of the printing presses one day, and Stan went out and with me and walked the floor, and we found there was a problem going on. Stan's out there with a white shirt and a tie on. And he says, hang on a minute, have you checked? And he gets down on his back on the concrete floor and slides his butt underneath the press. It blew me away. But yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like your story, Tim. And Stan went on, he's running about a $4 billion company today, I think. But it's so meaningful. It sends such a message to the rest of the organization if you get into the trenches and roll up the sleeves and get dirty with them.
That's a super powerful takeaway from this part of our conversation about leadership and rising up to those levels within, whether it's an organization in the industry, our own business, our dairy farms, but not being afraid to, as you just said, both of you, rolling up your sleeves, getting dirty, pitching out some corn silage, or getting down and dirty and right there in the trenches with the folks on the team. And what highly valuable skills that sometimes we may neglect because we get so busy being busy in our roles, but important things to take the time to be able to spend with the people that we're leading. And in that way, what I've heard from both of you too is that's showing the example. That's creating that culture. When you think about the culture, we talk about companies, we talk about corporations, but if you really think about family, right? And in our families, we have culture. And what's really stuck out to me about this conversation is you two as brothers. What an incredible culture your family must have had, that from where you are today, you still are so aligned in your core values, as we've talked about. Different branches of the industry that you've gone into, different experiences, but such strong commonalities on the core values and the core focus of what it means to surround yourself with good people, take care of the people around you, be your best self every day, and bring others along with you, but also to be kind and to be humble while you're doing it. In this conversation today, we have shared so many lessons about life and leadership. And Dave, you've been so generous with your time and your story. But for Tim, I want to move to you for a moment here as we get closer to the end of this conversation. If you could pick the one most valuable thing you've learned from your big brother in his career and his life that's impacted yours, what would it be?
It's pretty easy for me that Dave has taught me, and he's been my mentor in being yourself and believing in yourself and never changing who you are. I laugh and say I'm just the hillbilly kid from Vermont. And Dave, I've heard you say the same thing, Dave. We really grew up in pretty solid, humble beginnings, but Dave has just taught me to be me. I think you know me, Peggy, well enough to know there is no other side of Tim Abbott than you'll see. And I think that's what Dave taught me, because I watched him grow to great levels of success, and he was never any different. Sometimes he drove a nicer car. If you want to talk about driving nice cars, we can talk about that now, because it seems to be something. It might be important to Dave at 74. It's not to me at 60. But you knew we would have a little brotherly love here.
Wait till you get to 74 and have a midlife crisis all over again.
They come in waves? What?
But no, he's taught me to be myself. And honestly, he showed me success. If you don't quite know what success looks like, you got to look to somebody that you want to be like. And there's many people in my life I've wanted to emulate, but certainly Dave's career was how I got my start. So I don't know if that's fair or not. But
Oh, that was really nice, Tim.
I didn't mean it to be.
Dave, do you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, I do a couple of things. One is I go back to our foundation, and growing up, I felt like our family was pretty dysfunctional, like most families in this country or around the world. What our mom and dad did, Knight and Ruth, they instilled in us core values, as you called them, Peggy. They weren't deeply religious people, but we both came away with very strong faith. They were family people, and we came away being strong family people. There's nothing more important to either of us, I don't think, than our faith and our family. Our careers are secondary to those. And, Tim and Sharon and Chelsea and Caitlin, golly, I'm so proud of what they've done and love them. They're incredible. And to have played a little part of it. Tim has helped me too. I think he and Dan Banson, a dairy producer out in Oregon, one of Tim's good friends, learned a lot from Dan and Tim. One thing I think was how far a rental car will go up a manure pile. Another thing I learned is that it's really easier to catch salmon in the Tillamook River at night under the moon and the stars with a net than it is.
Is that legal?
We never experienced it, Peggy. We heard about it.
You heard. Okay.
Yeah, we heard. Yeah, we've heard tell. I had to get a couple of them in there. But no, I'm so proud and pleased to be part of their lives. I said earlier, and I'll say it again, what Tim and Sharon have accomplished it makes me look like my accomplishments are little bitty babies. I'm proud of them and just glad that I could be a part of it, along for the ride.
Tim, do you have any comments on that?
Well, Peggy, let's digress just a bit here for a minute. If Dave really wants to have fun with us, Peggy, tell him to meet us in Nashville. He has not accepted my invitation, but maybe, Peggy, you're a Nashville faithful. Maybe you could get him to come there. That would be really nice, wouldn't it, Peggy?
That would be really nice, Dave.
I'd love to join you. And if there happens to be a basketball game in Nashville, there's a good chance I might come back. No, I'd love to, and love to meet you in person, Peggy, one of these days. And I enjoy every minute Tim and I spend together. We don't spend enough time together. We lived in Florida on the East Coast, and he moved to the West Coast. And then I think we saw him twice the 8 years we were in Florida. And when we moved to Colorado Springs, the first thing I heard was, I thought we were going to see more of you, and now you moved to Colorado. Well, you only came over once, for crying out loud. Anyway.
The brotherly love is real. One thing that you both have said in our conversation today too, that has stuck with me is that faith is at the center of what drives both of you and what guides you. And I'm really curious for you, Dave at 74 and Tim at 60. At this point in life, as you lean on your faith in different aspects, what do you pray for?
That's a good question. I would say I pray for the happiness of my children. That would be my number one prayer. And my second is the health of my friends. So that's what I use my faith for, I think. And I spend more time praying for my kids and my friends than I do anything else.
I mean, that definitely, my kids, my wife, good health, happiness for them. But my prayer for a while has been that I do God's will, not mine. And that I am able to figure out what that is. And rather than getting off on some of my tangents of what I think I should be doing or want to be doing, do God's will instead of Dave's will. And I pray that I'll get better at that. And at 74, I feel very blessed to be in the health that I'm in and the condition I am. Sure, I got my 70-year-old aches and pains and issues that I deal with, but very blessed to be able to get out and do things and enjoy God's creation out there, especially here in Colorado now. And we've been blessed to live in a lot of different places and have a lot of good friends around the country and enjoyed every bit of it. I'm just thankful that I am where I am, because I know, but for the grace of God, I could be one of those homeless people on the side of the street in Nashville.
Appreciate you both sharing that. And so, Dave, I always pick one word for the year. I asked him to pick his word this year, which is focus. My word is stewardship. And what's really come to light as I've been really studying that word this year and reflecting on it is that stewardship is about taking what God's given us and using it, right? And that word steward goes back to managing estates in early times. And when you had the opportunity to manage an estate, the expectation was that you would take what you had been given and what you were in charge of taking care of, and you would multiply it and you would make it fruitful and you would make it profitable. You would leave it better than you found it. And I'm going to take that word stewardship and I'm going to apply it to the way that I hear from each of you that you both also are serving where you're at. It's what's got you where you are. And clearly neither of you are done yet. So thank you so much for jumping on with me today. Any final thoughts?
I'll leave you with one on stewardship, Peggy, and then I'll be done. But one of my great friends at home in Vermont is the pastor of our little church in Franklin, Vermont, a town of 700-800 people. And Pastor Jason McConnell has come there and brought a community together. And stewardship is one of his things that he's most focused on. He talks about community leadership through service and pastoral leadership that way, and he's writing books on it. But each summer, he brings 5 college students to northern Vermont from a school in Alabama that all want to be pastors, and he submerses them in our community for 2 weeks. And they go to a funeral home, and they go to a jail, and they go meet with the local people, and they all give a presentation at church. But Jason's whole project is stewardship in teaching people to build communities. And it's through religion, but still it's stewardship. And what he's done, the list of people that want to come to Vermont for those 2 weeks in July and the summer and do Jason's program, it's unmatched. They jump over each other to come to Vermont. They come to our house each year and spend an afternoon with Sharon and I. And every one of them say it's the greatest gift they've ever been given to come learn from Jason the stewardship of taking it to the next level. So I guess I leave it with that. That's down a rabbit hole that's totally different, Peggy. But your word of the year, I may have to use that next year because it's so powerful. So thanks for having me on today. My goodness, this has been a long one.
And Dave, final thoughts from you today?
Just thank you. It was an opportunity to spend some time with Big Timmy, and I don't get to do that very often. But it goes back to what we talked about earlier, the opportunity to give back and to share some experience. And if anyone is still awake when they finish the edited version of what we've done, I just hope that maybe there's something, some little nugget in there that somebody takes away and it helps them as they're dealing with something at work or in their lives or whatever the case may be. So thanks for asking me. It's been fun and wish you the best.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I know I've personally grown and benefited from this conversation, but it won't end here. There'll be many, many ears that hear it and many people in our industry and far beyond that are going to get to take the time to listen to what you shared today, as we've talked about leadership, as we've talked about life, and as we've talked about these paths that have led you, Dave, to where corn doesn't grow, and Tim to your should have been a cowboy life that is a little bit cowboyish these days. Thank you so much, gentlemen. What incredible lessons on life and leadership you've heard today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast with our special guest, Tim Abbott, and his brother, Dave Abbott. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and until next time, keep on growing, keep on learning, and up-leveling your dairy.